Shut up and sit down.
Hi guys, it's Thursday, so it's tutorial time, and welcome to how to paint a Gorkanaut Part 3. I hope that's not how the rest of the video is going to go, but what we're doing here is I've got the wet palette, so this time there's no airbrush, so just doing the Orc Riders. The wet palette is essentially a cloth in a tub with water on it with a bit of parchment paper, and you can see in the background how runny that paint is. Instead of doing the old 2 thin coats, we're going to do a countless amount of coats on this. You can see it's almost going on like a wash. But what happens when you do this is you lose none of the detail or clog up anything or leave any streaky marks, because you do lots and lots more layers. You're looking at like 6, 7, maybe 8 layers just for the base coat. And because it's a wet palette, it's going to keep our paint nice and dry, so, nice and wet. Told you that's how the video is going to go. Anyway, great. Yeah, it's going to keep your paint nice and wet, so instead of applying paint and it drying up and then you're getting a brush stroke or not as smooth coat, you can see how wet that is on my thumb. It's almost like a water consistency. So what we've done is we've used Cayman Green for the base coat by Game Colour, and we've added a tiny bit of Talon Sand into it now by Games Workshop. It looks a lot brighter than the base coat, but because it's so watered down, acrylic paints do that, they look brighter, and you're going to end up with a, when it dries, you're barely going to be able to notice it. But because it's a wet palette, we're also going to be able to put on tons and tons of layers and build it up. Now I switched the model because there's more muscle texture on this one, and that's literally just the same 2 colours there, over and over again, putting it on, letting it dry a little bit as you go round. So the other great thing about the wet palette and it being summer in England at the moment is I'll apply that, and a couple of minutes later it'll be dry enough to paint over again. So by the time I've gone around the flesh, it's sorted. Also you can see I'm building up the colour there on the bottom of the cheek where the light will hit. You want to be hitting all those raised areas, and with the wet palette what we're doing is we're going from the shaded area and pulling the almost a wash sort of paint up to the highlighted area, then letting it dry. That's basically going to be how we do the entirety of this model. I wouldn't do this on your regular alt boys because it's going to take forever and they come off by the handfuls. Not so much now though, with 8th coming out, which is cool. Looking forward to doing some more of my Orc army. Now we're using just Talon Sand. This is a bit thicker than last time because it's just a base coat for the shirt. Then Beige by Model Colour, which is, it's much more awkward to do the shirt because unlike the muscle texture, there's no clear direction on which the highlights would go. So do a whole load of layers and then do more layers at the top, from the bottom at the top, going down halfway and then going back up again, and that will blend it. But the shirts are quite awkward to do in this manner. Then the old Agrax Earthshade by Games Workshop to darken down those recesses a bit more, and the reason you put the wash on after this is if there's any strokes or any markings from your brush on there that you didn't want, that'll blend those 2 colours together, so your smooth transition will look even smoother when it's done. And with the wet blending, build this up and go over it as many times as you want. So you're doing that, I could easily now go over that with another beige watered down and build up those layers again, which I think I do later on. This is German Grey by Model Colour, which they do a military colour range, which is pretty cool. I didn't want the whole thing to look this light, it came out a bit lighter than I hoped, but if you wanted to do denim jeans, this would work as a very good base coat for that. That's German Grey by Model Colour. One of my favourite combinations is Dryad Bark for leather. It's Dryad Bark really watered down because he's got a hat on, which we're going to make leather. Again, you can see how watered down that is. It's going to take a lot of coats. Don't forget to do his boots and his straps and everything else. Then we use the German Grey again. Added a tiny bit of Wolf Grey by Game Air. And as you can see, this is what I mean about it starting to look like a pair of denim jeans of some kind. So I may use this for that at some point. But glazing again the top parts, and it does look like a very strong contrast because of the wolf grey we've put in, but as it dries it won't look as vibrant. Then the good old null oil by Games Workshop over the entirety of that to tone it back down, because I wasn't going for a really bright denim look. It's been ages since we've done a video where you don't need to use an airbrush, guys, so hopefully we'll be bringing out a few more of those, because we see a lot of our viewers don't watch the entire thing. I think that's the reason why, is we use a lot of airbrush. Now it's Gorkanaut brown, watered down a lot. And what we're doing is I put quite a puddle on there, and I'm just going to use my brush to push that pigment around because it's still a glaze. So I'm pushing it around to all the edges. I'll let that set, then I'll do a couple more layers around the edges. And any of these colours that you're not happy with by the end of it, you want to highlight even more, just put a tiny bit of white into your wet palette, or Rakoff Flesh into your wet palette, mix that up, and you can re-highlight anything you've done just around the edges using that glaze technique to bring it up even further. This is just a good old-fashioned Games Workshop lead belcher. You're not really going to be able to see this part because this is the guy who sits on the Gorkanaut. I've got it on the left arm, the big gun, which now has some amazing stats. I can't wait to put my Gorkanaut on the battlefield. Now to tone that leather together a bit more, you can see the high contrasts on there. We're going to blend it together using Agrax shade, because what else would we use for blending browns together? As you can see, I also did his boots as steel toe cap boots. I can never remember what this blue is. It's definitely a Games Workshop blue of some kind. Begins with C. So it's the second time I've done the audio for this and I still get stuck on what blue that is. The mouth, unlike doing Bugman's Glow, I prefer to start with a Tusker Fur base. And I cover the entire mouth, including the teeth, and the reason for that is when we go back in later, if you miss anything, it will have blended it together. It will look like the teeth are coming out of the gums rather than there's a separate hard line, which I've seen on quite a few things. Reclam Flesh shade was then applied to the entirety of the mouth to give it a bit more depth. And you can see that's looking a lot more of a rich colour now. I know I used rust grey for the edge highlights on his goggles, and I do apologise for the focus. I was so into what I was doing on here. I was getting this ready for Golden Demon and managed to get hold of a bronze for the Gorkanaut, which wasn't too bad at all. I was really happy with that, so that's why some of the footage is not as good as it usually is. I was really focused on finishing my work. Now, because the wet palette's still set up and the colours haven't dried yet, I've added a little bit of Rakoff Flesh into the Talon Sand, and just doing the same glazes again, just over the muscle textures to really bring out the details. I want to accentuate those as much as possible. Eventually I do water down some null oil with some Lamiate medium considerably and then wash that down. And this is, I can't remember what blue shade this is. When it comes to blues, I'm not your guy at all. Andy can remember all of his blues off by heart. It's just the glaze by Games Workshop, the only blue glaze they've got, to bring those goggles to life. Add some more reflective surface to it. Teeth were then painted in Zandri dust. You don't want to water down your paint too much on these because you don't want it running into the mouth. But painting all those up relatively simple. Start at the front and then work your brush backwards until you think you've covered enough of the teeth. The palette wise, his face looks fine. Then we're going to highlight those with the Shabty bone. And like I was saying, there's bits of footage missing off the end of this, and the reason for that is we were going Golden Demon and that became my primary concern other than the videos, so I do apologise for that. But after that, anything on here now, you just add a little bit of Rakkar flesh to whatever colour it is you're using and just keep highlighting up, guys. I did the same thing around his leather hat, his boots and everything else, and it really brings that together. Whereas you can see, this flesh has had countless layers added to it. Just adding a bit more Rakkar flesh and adding that in. The lip was done in Demonette, no, Slanesh Grey, sorry. And then when I did the black wash on everything, it brought it all down and watered it down, put it on the entirety of the skin, including the lip, and pulled all that together. And that's all we got time for, and that's all the footage we've got, so I apologise for that, guys. This is supposed to be a part 4, it's not going to be a part 4. What it's going to be instead is how we do the OSL, and that's going to be finished on Stormlord. Do apologise for the missing footage. I hope you like the video. Like, comment, subscribe, we've got tons more coming out, guys. Alright, thanks for watching, bye.